All right, let's dive in. Today we're taking a deep dive into Plato's Republic.
Oh, the Republic.
Yeah. We're going to explore those juicy bits about justice and societal structures and,
Excellent.
of course, the allegory of the cave.
Of course.
You ready for this?
Always ready for Plato.
Yeah.
I think what's so compelling about the Republic is that it's not just some, dusty old text.
Okay.
Um,
Right.
it grapples with these questions that are still incredibly relevant in our modern world. Like,
Yeah.
what is justice, right? What does a good society look like? And how do we even know what's real?
Yeah. Like, those are huge questions.
They are.
And Plato, he just doesn't shy away from them. Like, right away, he has Socrates.
Right.
His main character just going around and dismantling everybody's comfortable little definitions of justice.
It's like Socrates is on this philosophical rampage, right? Like taking on those common ideas about justice,
Yeah.
being about helping your friends or harming your enemies or simply whatever benefits the powerful.
Mhm.
But through these series of, clever arguments and thought experiments,
Yeah.
he just exposes the flaws in every single one.
So where does Plato go from there?
Yeah.
Like, if all those common notions of justice are just wrong, what's next?
Well, instead of just, you know, giving us his own definition,
Yeah.
he takes this fascinating detour.
Okay.
He has Socrates create this hypothetical ideal city, almost like a blueprint for what a just society would actually look like.
Okay, so why build a city just to understand justice? Like, what's the connection?
Well, Plato believed that to truly grasp the concept of justice, like on an individual level, you kind of need to zoom out and see how it plays out on a larger scale,
Right.
like within an entire society.
Okay.
So this ideal city becomes like a model
Right.
for understanding justice in all of its complexity.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So what does this ideal city actually look like?
Well, one of the first things you'd notice is that it's divided into three distinct classes of citizens: the guardians,
Okay.
the auxiliaries, and the producers.
3 classes. That sounds kind of rigid.
It does, a little bit, yeah.
So give me the rundown. Who are these people?
All right, so at the top, you have the guardians. They are the wise rulers,
Hmm.
the ones who actually govern the city. And their defining virtue is wisdom. They're driven by reason and a deep understanding of what's truly good for everyone.
Okay, so wise rulers. Sounds promising. Who's next?
All right, then you have the auxiliaries. So they're the warriors, the brave defenders of the city.
Mm.
And their virtue is courage. They're motivated by a sense of honor and duty. They're the ones that protect the city from threats, both internal and external.
Okay, so guardians, warriors.
Right.
Got it.
Yeah.
Who makes up that last group?
All right, finally, we have the producers. So these are the craftspeople, the farmers, the merchants, basically everyone who provides for the city's material needs, right?
Right.
Their virtue is temperance,
Okay.
which for Plato means a kind of self-control
Right.
and acceptance of their role in this larger scheme of things.
Okay, so 3 very distinct classes, each with their own,
Yeah.
specific role and virtue. But how does this tie back to the idea of justice?
So for Plato, justice in the city emerges when each of these classes performs its function in perfect harmony.
All right.
He compares it to the human soul,
Okay.
which he believed was composed of reason, spirit, and desire.
Mm-hmm.
So just like a well-balanced person has those 3 elements working together harmoniously,
Right.
a just city has its guardians, its auxiliaries, and its producers, each playing their part without overstepping their boundaries.
So everyone's staying in their lane, doing what they're supposed to do. That's what Plato considers justice.
Exactly. When everything's in its right place and functioning as it should, that's when true justice is achieved.
Mhm.
But of course,
Yeah.
this kind of makes you wonder, how do you actually get people to stay in their lane willingly?
Right.
And is that even the best way to organize things?
Yeah. Is everyone really cut out to be a guardian or a producer? And who decides
Yeah.
who gets to be in which group? I feel like this system could lead to some problems.
You're hitting on some key issues that Plato himself grapples with.
Okay.
One of the biggest questions is, if the guardians are supposed to be the wisest and most just, how do you ensure that only the right people end up in that role? And this leads us to one of Plato's most radical claims, that only philosophers can truly be just rulers.
Wait, only philosophers? That sounds a little far-fetched, doesn't it? Why does Plato think that they're the best candidates for leadership?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Plato believed that philosophers have a unique kind of knowledge, like a knowledge of the forms,
Okay.
including the most important form of All the form of the good.
Hold on. Forms. We need to unpack this.
We do. We do.
Oh,
So think of the forms as these perfect, eternal, unchanging blueprints
okay.
that exist beyond our everyday world of, senses.
Okay.
So for example, like think about beauty.
Okay.
We see beautiful things in the world like a sunset or a flower.
Right.
But those things eventually fade, right?
Mhm.
So for Plato, there's a form of beauty, this perfect essence of beauty
Okay.
that exists outside of time and space.
Right.
And it's the same for concepts like truth and justice.
Okay. So these forms are like the ultimate ideals that
Yes.
everything in our world is based on.
Exactly.
But how does knowing about these abstract forms
Right.
make someone a good ruler?
Well, Plato believed that because philosophers have grasped these forms, especially the form of the good,
Huh.
they have a deeper understanding of what's truly good for society.
Hmm.
They're not driven by self-interest or swayed by popular opinion, but guided by this knowledge of what's truly right and just.
So they're like the ultimate visionaries,
Yeah.
seeing the bigger picture that most of us miss.
Yes.
Okay, I can kind of see where Plato's coming from, but wouldn't it be tough to convince people
Yeah.
to hand over the reins to a philosopher?
Absolutely. And that's a tension that Plato himself acknowledges. The philosopher, having seen this, higher truth,
Right.
might not even want to rule
Yeah.
it right. And the city, in turn, might reject the philosopher's wisdom,
Right.
finding it too abstract or impractical.
Mhm.
So you have this fascinating conflict
Yeah.
between the world of ideas
Okay.
and the world of everyday life.
So it's like Plato is saying that the most qualified people to lead are the ones least likely to want the job.
Pretty much.
And even if they did, no one would believe them.
Pretty much.
That's rough.
It is, yeah. It's a paradoxical situation.
It is.
But before we get too bogged down on the politics of Plato's ideal city,
Okay.
I think it's time we ventured into that famous cave of his.
Yes. Cave time. The allegory of the cave is one of those ideas that just sticks with you.
It does.
It's like
Yeah.
he created this incredibly vivid image that helps us grasp something really profound about human perception and, the search for truth.
It is one of the most enduring metaphors in philosophical history.
Yeah.
So get ready, because Plato is about to take us on a wild ride. Imagine this, okay?
Yeah.
You are chained in a dark cave facing a blank wall. You've been there your whole life. You can't move your head. All you ever see are these shadows flickering on the wall, cast by objects passing in front of a fire behind you.
It's like being trapped in a movie theater that only plays shadows.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You wouldn't even know there's a whole world outside the screen.
Right.
Now imagine one of the prisoners breaks free and stumbles out of the cave.
Okay.
At first, they're blinded and disoriented by the sunlight, right?
Yeah.
But gradually, their eyes adjust. They start to see the real world, the objects that were only casting shadows before, the sun itself. What do you think their reaction would be?
Well, they would be blown away. Like, I'd imagine they'd want to rush back and tell all the other prisoners about this incredible reality they've just discovered.
Exactly. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Imagine they return to the cave. Now their eyes, now accustomed to the sunlight, would have trouble seeing those faint shadows again. They'd be stumbling around,
Mm-hmm.
appearing clumsy and foolish to the other prisoners.
Right.
And if they try to explain the sun, the real world they experience,
Yeah.
do you think anyone would believe them?
Probably not.
Mm.
They would probably think that they just went crazy from being out in the sun too long.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's the tragedy that Plato is highlighting here, right?
Right.
The allegory shows us how deeply attached we can become to what's familiar, even if it's just an illusion.
Right.
So the cave represents the world of appearances, the limited way we perceive things through our senses.
Okay.
The shadows are the illusions that we mistake for reality.
Right.
And that journey out of the cave,
Yeah.
that's that difficult, often painful process
Yeah.
of philosophical enlightenment,
Yeah.
of seeking truth and knowledge beyond those, superficial appearances.
Wow. Okay. I'm starting to see how this all connects. But how does the cave relate to the idea of justice that we were talking about earlier?
Well, the connection might seem kind of subtle,
Okay.
but it's actually quite profound. So for Plato, true justice requires seeing beyond those shadows,
Yeah.
beyond those everyday illusions,
Okay.
and understanding the forms. Remember those?
Yeah.
This perfect eternal blueprints we talked about.
Right. The forms.
Yes.
So to be truly just,
Yeah.
you need to understand these abstract concepts.
That's Plato's argument. He believed that the forms, especially the form of the good, are the key to understanding what's truly just and how to create a just society.
Okay.
And who are the people most likely to grasp those forms?
The philosophers, the cave escapees.
Exactly. They're the ones who made that journey out of the cave and seen the light of truth.
Right.
And that's why Plato believed that only philosophers can be truly just rulers.
Yeah.
They have the knowledge and wisdom to guide society towards what's truly good.
That's pretty mind-blowing stuff. But I'm still trying to wrap my head around how we can apply this to our own lives.
Right.
I mean, it's not like we're literally chained in a cave, right?
True. But the allegory is meant to be symbolic.
Mm.
It's asking us to think about what shadows we might be mistaking for reality in our own lives.
Right.
What beliefs or assumptions or even, sources of information
Right.
might be giving us a distorted view of the world.
Okay, so it's like we need to do our own personal cave audit.
Yeah,
Figure out what might be holding us back from seeing the bigger picture.
exactly. And that's where education comes in.
Okay.
Plato believed that education wasn't just about, stuffing our heads with facts,
Right.
but about helping us to turn away from the shadows and towards the light of truth. And he even had some radical ideas about the role music could play in this process.
Wait, music.
Yes, music.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. What does music have to do with escaping the cave?
Well, it turns out that Plato was quite the music critic. He believed that music has this powerful effect on our souls and can shape our character, either for good or bad.
Okay.
He even went as far as to say that certain types of music should be banned from his ideal city because they encouraged laziness or weakness.
No heavy metal in the Republic, I guess.
I guess not.
But what kind of music did Plato endorse?
Well, he believed that the ideal music should be carefully chosen to cultivate virtue and harmony within the soul. So he favored simple melodies and rhythms
Okay.
that promoted order and balance, reflecting the kind of harmonious society he envisioned. It's a fascinating idea that something as seemingly harmless as music could have this profound impact
Yeah.
on our moral development.
It makes you wonder what Plato would think about, like, our modern music scene.
It does.
Are our Spotify playlists secretly shaping our character?
That's a great question, and one we should explore further.
Yeah.
But before we get carried away by our playlist,
Okay.
there's one more kind of controversial concept we
Okay.
need to unpack from Plato's Republic: the noble lie.
Okay, the noble lie. Now that sounds like we're about to enter some dangerous territory.
It is. It is. It's definitely one of the most debated aspects of Plato's philosophy. So buckle up. Things are about to get really interesting. So the noble lie is this fascinating idea that sometimes, for the sake of social harmony and stability,
Right.
rulers might need to, fib a little.
Okay.
It's not just any old lie, though. Like, it has to be a lie told with the intention of benefiting the people.
Right.
A lie that helps them, accept their place in society and live virtuous lives.
Hold on. Even in this ideal city built on justice and truth,
Right.
we're okay with a little bending of the truth.
That's right. Plato argued that in certain situations, a bit of deception, what he called a noble lie,
Okay.
might be necessary for the greater good. And he even proposed a specific myth for his ideal city.
Okay.
It's a story about how people are born from the earth with different metals mixed into their souls, determining their social class.
So you're born with gold in your soul. You're destined to be a guardian, silver, an auxiliary, and bronze, you're a producer. That's a pretty elaborate way to justify a social hierarchy.
It is. And it definitely raises all sorts of questions about the relationship between truth, power, and the well-being of society.
It makes you wonder about the trade-offs involved in leadership, right? Like, is it ever okay to sacrifice honesty for the sake of stability? It feels like a slippery slope.
It is. It certainly is. And it's a question that's just as relevant today as it was in Plato's time.
Right.
Think about the narratives that shape public opinion, foster patriotism, or justify political actions.
Yeah.
Are those narratives always entirely truthful?
Right.
And even if they're not, can they sometimes serve a positive purpose?
Yeah.
These are complex questions.
Yeah, they are.
And Plato doesn't offer easy answers.
He doesn't. It makes you realize that governing even an ideal city is
Yeah.
anything but simple.
Right.
But I guess that's why Plato's work is still so relevant. He forces us to confront these really tough questions head on.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that the Republic isn't meant to be like a step-by-step guide for building a perfect society. It's more of a thought experiment, an exploration of possibilities and challenges in our pursuit of justice.
So it's like Plato's giving us this toolbox of ideas and saying, all right, here's how you might think about building a just society. Now go out and grapple with these complex issues yourselves.
Exactly. He's encouraging us to be active participants in the search for justice,
Right.
not passive followers of someone else's blueprint.
Right.
And that message is still so powerful, even thousands of years later.
It is. Okay, so we might not be able to create a perfect society,
Right.
but we can at least strive to understand those core principles that Plato lays out: wisdom, courage, temperance,
Right.
and of course, justice itself.
That's a great takeaway.
Mhm.
And I think it's worth emphasizing that even though Plato was writing about, ancient Greece,
Right.
these principles are universal. They speak to something fundamental about the human condition, our longing for a good life and a just society.
Thinking back to those prisoners trapped in the cave,
Yeah.
it makes you wonder, what are some of the shadows that we might be mistaking for reality today?
That's such a crucial question for all of us to consider. Like,
Yes.
what are those unexamined beliefs or assumptions that we hold?
Right.
What sources of information might be giving us a distorted view of the world?
It's almost like we each need to do our own personal cave audit.
Exactly.
Figure out what's preventing us from seeing the full picture.
Exactly. And just like that prisoner who escapes the cave,
Right.
we might experience discomfort and resistance when we start challenging our deeply held beliefs.
Right.
But it's a necessary journey if we want to get closer to truth and justice.
And maybe that's where Plato's emphasis on education comes in, right? It's about constantly learning, questioning, refining our understanding of the world.
Absolutely. Education isn't just about acquiring knowledge. It's about developing that ability to think critically,
Yeah.
to discern truth from falsehood, and make informed decisions about how we want to live our lives.
And maybe that's why Plato was so concerned about music. It's not just entertainment.
Right.
It's a force that can shape our emotions, our
Right.
values,
Right.
even our character.
You're getting it. Plato understood that we're constantly bombarded with these influences
Yeah.
that shape who we are.
Right.
Music is one powerful example.
Right.
And in today's world, we can extend that idea to other forms of media and entertainment.
Right.
The stories we consume, the images we're exposed to, the algorithms that curate our online experience.
Yeah.
Are these forces shaping us in ways we don't even realize?
That's a chilling thought. Are we choosing our playlists, or are playlists choosing us?
Right.
Are we shaping our own online experience, or is it shaping us?
That's worth pondering. I think Plato would urge us to be mindful of those influences,
Okay.
to cultivate a discerning eye and ear, to seek out art and entertainment that uplifts and ennobles the soul.
It's not just about escaping the cave. It's about being selective about what we bring back in with us, making sure we're not just replacing one set of shadows with another.
Precisely.
Yeah.
We need to be active curators of our own, intellectual and emotional environments.
Right.
And that takes effort,
Right.
kind of discernment,
Right.
and a willingness to question those assumptions.
It's fascinating how Plato connects individual growth with a just society.
Yeah.
Like, to have a just society, we need just individuals. And to be just individuals, we need to develop those same virtues reflected in his ideal city. Wisdom, courage, temperance.
It's a holistic vision, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like the individual and society are interconnected
Yeah.
and interdependent. What's good for one is ultimately good for the other. And Plato believed that by understanding the nature of justice and how we can achieve it,
Right.
we can create a better world for ourselves and future generations.
Okay, hearing all this makes me want to reread The Republic with fresh eyes.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious, what would Plato say about those who escape the cave but choose to return?
You mean those who achieve a certain level of enlightenment,
Right.
but then decide to stay engaged with the everyday world with all of its imperfections and illusions?
Exactly. They've seen the sun. They understand truth at a deeper level,
Right.
but they still want to help those who are in the dark. What do you think Plato would make of that choice?
That's a really insightful question. On one hand, Plato suggests that the philosopher's ultimate calling is to contemplate the forms,
Mm-hmm.
to dwell in the realm of pure truth and beauty.
Okay.
But he also acknowledges that the philosopher has a responsibility to share that knowledge and wisdom with others.
So it's not just about personal enlightenment, it's also about using that knowledge to make the world a better place.
Right. And I think Plato would recognize that there are different ways to do that. Some philosophers might live a life of quiet contemplation, sharing their insights through writing or teaching. Others might be drawn to the political realm,
Right.
working to shape policies and institutions.
Right.
And some might choose to work within their communities, promoting education and ethical behavior.
So many paths for those who've seen the light.
It highlights the importance of individual choice and responsibility.
Right.
We each have a role to play in the pursuit of justice, and there's no one right approach. What matters is that we're aware of those shadows that might be distorting our perception, that we actively seek truth and knowledge and use our insights to have a positive impact on the world around us.
This is giving me so much to think about. I feel like our deep dive into the Republic isn't over yet. There's still so much to explore.
You're absolutely right. We've only scratched the surface of this incredibly rich and challenging text. But hopefully, you've gotten a taste of what makes Plato such a compelling thinker, even all these centuries later.
I definitely have, and I have a feeling we'll be revisiting his ideas for many deep dives to come. But for now, let's shift gears and address you directly, dear listener.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've journeyed through Plato's Republic, right?
Yeah.
Exploring justice, ideal cities, the allegory of the cave, philosopher kings, music censorship, and even those tricky noble lies. It's been quite the ride.
It has.
But where does all this leave you, the listener? What does this deep dive into Plato's work mean for you right now?
That's the big question, isn't it? And I think what's fascinating is that Plato doesn't give us like this neat and tidy answer, right?
Yeah.
He's not handing us a rule book or a political system to implement.
Yeah.
He's offering us more of like a way of thinking,
Right.
a framework for understanding the world and our place in it.
It's like he's saying, here are the big questions.
Right.
Now go out there and wrestle with them yourself.
Exactly. And that wrestling, that process of questioning and seeking understanding,
Yeah.
that's what's truly important. Plato believed that the unexamined life isn't worth living. He challenges us to engage in self-reflection, to constantly question our beliefs and assumptions, and to strive for a life of virtue and justice.
So it's not just about reading the Republic. It's about taking those ideas and applying them to our own lives and our own
Right.
society.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that application can take many forms.
Yeah.
It might be as simple as being more mindful of the information we consume,
Yeah.
the choices we make, and how we treat others.
Yeah.
Or it could be as ambitious as working to reform our political systems, educational institutions, or cultural values.
No pressure then. Just go out and change the world,
Right.
armed with some ancient Greek philosophy.
Well, maybe not the whole world, but at least our little corner of it, right?
Right.
I mean, what I find so inspiring about Plato is his belief in the power of ideas to transform individuals and societies.
Yeah.
He believed that by understanding the nature of justice,
Yeah.
goodness, and truth,
Right.
we can create a better world.
Right.
And that message, it resonates just as strongly today as it did back then.
It does. It gives you a sense of hope, doesn't it? Even when things feel messy and complicated,
Yeah,
there's this potential for good that we can tap into.
exactly. And it's up to each of us to do the work, to seek that understanding,
Right.
to cultivate those virtues, and to make choices that lead us closer to that ideal.
You know, I keep thinking back to the allegory of the cave.
Yeah.
Now that we've explored this with you, does it change how you view your own perceptions? Do you ever catch yourself mistaking those shadows for reality?
All the time.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a constant struggle, especially in today's world, where we're bombarded with so much information, so many perspectives and competing narratives. It's easy to get caught up in, the surface level of things,
Right.
to mistake opinions for facts or accept beliefs that are just convenient or comfortable. But I think that allegory, it reminds us to be skeptical, to dig deeper,
Yeah.
and to question those assumptions that we might be taking for granted.
It's like we need to develop that philosopher's eye, right?
We do.
That ability to see past the shadows and
Yeah.
discern the truth.
Precisely. And that's a skill that takes practice
Right.
and cultivation. It doesn't happen overnight, but the more we engage in critical thinking, challenge our own beliefs,
Right.
and seek out diverse perspectives, the better equipped we'll be to navigate the world's complexities,
Right.
and the better choices we'll make.
Here's a final thought for you to ponder, dear listener. Could certain forms of entertainment, like social media,
Oh, yeah.
be considered modern-day shadows on the cave wall?
Interesting.
Are we so caught up in those curated feeds, filtered images, and bite-sized bits of information that we're losing sight of the bigger picture,
Yeah.
of deeper truths?
That's a provocative question, and I think it deserves serious consideration. Plato was writing about a very different world, of course,
Right.
but his insights into human nature and the challenges of perception are timeless, right?
Right.
So yes, it's definitely possible that some forms of modern entertainment, especially those designed to be addictive
Right.
or reinforce our biases,
Right.
could be seen as modern-day shadows. It's up to each of us to be aware of those potential pitfalls, to cultivate a healthy skepticism, and to seek out experiences that help us grow, learn, and connect with something larger than ourselves.
Well said. A huge thank you to our expert for guiding us on this philosophical journey.
Thank you for having me.
And to you, dear listener, for diving deep with us into Plato's Republic. Keep those minds curious and keep those conversations flowing. As Plato reminds us, the search for truth and justice is a lifelong adventure.